Really quick, we're going to do a overview of the Backup Ops web console offered from Wholesale Backup that you'll get as part of your partnership when you join us. Starting out here, it's just a quick glance of how many brands you have under your account, how many accounts are under your brands, and also how many computers you have total, and then the total storage allocated by all those computers. Over here under the brands tab, we have the location where you can make as many branded installers as you want, connecting to different cloud storage backends or your own self-hosted Windows server backup location. If you wanted to host it yourself, you can. And then from here, you could just pick one of these options, fill out the installer build form here with the required information, hit build the installer, and it'll just within about 2 minutes it'll create your own branded backup installer that you can use for deploying on your endpoint machines for your customers. You can download the installer from right here. You can make any edits or changes you need right here too. Moving on to the storage area. I'm just going to pick one of my brands instead of all of them. Okay, so from here you're going to get a list view of all the computers under your brand. You can drill into them specifically, and here it'll show you the storage trends over time. And if you're ever in a case where you need to recover the password to do a restore for that customer, we have that available for you here, as long as the customer allowed for them to provide the password for you to back up in case they forget it. That's available for you right there. These tables can be exported through different formats if you want to import it into billing software or create spreadsheets for billing, that kind of thing. You can just export them right here. You can also run filters on here, so if you just wanted to look for a particular customer, like Joe, you can see Joe's machines here, and then we can just focus on those. You can refresh the table to get the newest data available on from the database, and you can also filter the columns more to your liking. If you want to filter things out or just focus on certain things or have all of it available, you could just turn on everything. Okay, moving on to the transfers tab. The transfers tab is where you're going to see the most recent and active backup activity for connected clients. So if you're here, we'll just drill into this one. It'll show you the last connected backup time, what happened from that backup. If there was any messages, if it encountered anything, it would report it here. This shows you the current selections. You can see there's stuff selected on the E drive here. And then it also shows you the exclusions that we put in there for you programmatically to exclude stuff that is not pertinent to backup and usually just gets in the way, garbage stuff. That's probably important for the system, but not for data recovery when you're trying to help a customer. The vault area shows the backend storage location where your data is stored. This current installer is pointed at Wasabi, so that's why it says Wasabi right there. It just shows the current metrics for that last connection and backup right here. And of course, here we have the contact details, so if we ever wanted to say we need to send an email or reach out to the customer, you could just do so from right here pretty easily. If you ever need to make adjustments or changes to this currently selected computer, we can just open the settings panel here and say we can adjust things like the no data threshold or the no connection threshold, which if you have your email SMTP settings set up, then basically the client will notify you and the customer if the data didn't connect in the specified amount of time listed here. You can also put in those SMTP settings here. However, the password must be entered locally on the client side specifically. You can adjust the backup settings if you want to turn on the like a local vault here. you could do so from here. So that way you could have uh, data stored up locally at the customer location and offsite at the remote vault location. There's a number of other settings here. They're all covered in our documentation pretty extensively, so I won't go through every single one here. But the schedule mode, you have the schedule options. You have the schedule mode and you have continuous mode. Continuous is just what it sounds like. It's going to start right here. Is set for every 180 minutes. You can set that to whatever you want. Say we just want to say 300 minutes, or scheduled. Say you just want to start it at the end of business hours for that customer. You also have the ability to add throttle settings here and the period that you want it throttled. So if you wanted to have it back up earlier in the day, but you didn't want to hog up all the bandwidth because they're still working, then you could do that here. Moving on to the customer info. So customer, there was a change in the company, so we're just going to update it to the new customer's name. Like so, and we can hit update. I won't do that yet because I want to show you one last thing, which is the expert setting tab. And from here, if you need to adjust the throttle settings, so if you just want to permanently have the client throttle to not use more than a specified megabits per second, here we go with kilobits. You could do so here. 0 just means unlimited. Retention, this is where you can adjust, so that's how many days of backups that you can keep to roll back to. So right here we just have it set for 11, but generally we set a default as 30, but you can set that for whatever makes sense for you and your customer, completely customizable. And versions, this is the amount of copies that the software will keep around of a particular file. So I have it set at 3, but 0 means unlimited, and that's usually the default, but you can set that to whatever you want. A lot of people like to play with these and find the combination that works best for their storage and their customers' backup needs. Other settings to keep in mind here, these are all covered in the documentation extensively, so I won't go into it for too long here, but down here you can hide the restore tab if you turn that on, or you could hide the backup settings and email tabs here if you turn that on. And that just means the customer can, if they open the software on their desktop, they won't modify these settings to perhaps inadvertently adjust something without your knowledge. You also have the option to completely lock the software down so they can't even open it without a password if you want to go that way too. So let's just hit update here and save that change for the customer name. So what's going to happen now is on the next scheduled backup, the client will pull in that new settings change and use it going forward, or we can actually push that change immediately right now with the remote manager feature, which we'll go to in a second. Actually, we can go there now because these ones are pretty much covered over there too, but we have the last thing to mention here before we move on is the client log, where we can read the log from the last backup, or we can check out the service log, and we can actually review the selections and make adjustments here remotely and push those changes. So heading over to remote manager, we find our testing machine here, and we see that it last connected 2 seconds ago, and we're just going to go ahead and push that change. So we're going to say sync settings, push that change. It's just going to, in a few seconds, it's going to grab that, sync it, and it's going to be deployed to that customer's machine with that new name change to the settings, and we might adjust the retention too. The remote manager allows you to do a few other things as well. Okay, we see the computer picked up that change, and here's the confirmation that it was doing a throughput test as it was connecting. We can refresh the table here, and we see that the last update time was changed here as well. So one of the things we can do here from the remote manager is, for instance, we see that this computer, we wanted to actually initiate a backup remotely, so we're just going to hit start backup, push that change. The computer acknowledged that and is starting a backup right now. So once we refresh this, we will see that this account here will start populating the activity tab with those changes. And we do that, see that here, measuring throughput. I'm going to go ahead and filter these by account name so we can focus on it. It's reading the selections, scanning, and it's going to go through the whole backup cycle here. There's many stages and steps to it. I'm not going to cover it all here because that's more of a deep dive on the actual backup process, but it's all covered in our documentation online for you guys. Moving on to the server tab, if you do have a wholesale backup server as an offsite backup location for your clients, here you can see some of the key information about that deployment here. You can actually do a test, and we're just seeing a HTTPS error, but don't worry about that. We still have a certificate on it. This is just showing us the last the timestamp and the server version that's running on that machine, and this also tells us that the server's up. We can also look at the server info, and that's going to give us some graphs about the backup service and the server specifically, so we can see the internet bandwidth throughput, process IO, CPU, memory, the connections, resources, and the status of backup accounts on it. So if you ever wanted to have an overview of your server's health and get some key metrics, this is a good place to go for that. With the users tab, you can actually create users that can sign in to the web console. So you just create a user email like this. You can choose to share your SMTP email settings with them and give them access to remote management if you want. What you want to do specifically is set them up to have access to only the accounts or brands you want them to see. So these are all my brands, and I'm just going to give this person access to just my one brand, and they can see all the computers under that one, but they won't be able to see anything else when they sign in. So you just hit save here. That would set up that user account for them. Then you would just click this here to push that invitation to them, and then they'd be able to sign in. They'd reset their password and sign in and only see the things that you'd allowed for them to see. Moving on to the reports and alerts area. With your SMTP settings that we mentioned previously, this is where you set them up. And what that does is allow for you to schedule reports and alerts that would go to you or your customers. The admin report for you would be the basically the overall view. It'd have all your installers, all your accounts, all your computers. It would give you the most recent status updates for all of those and what their last activities were. You can schedule it for the certain time or days of the week that you like. I just have mine for every day at a certain time, so I can review it. So user reports, so here's that user that we created. We can schedule them a report for the accounts that we assign to them, which would be all those ones under the Devion Wasabi brand, and they'd get it at the scheduled time that we had set up here for them. Okay, that's kind of a quick overview of the Backup Ops web console. I hope you found it helpful, and we look forward to working with you and helping you with your backups.